Welcome to this presentation of Hosted Payment Pages Form Flow Control. This presentation will give you an overview of how to control the hosted payment pages inside the forms and what kind of configurations options are available. In the introduction to our company, I've covered that in a number of videos, so I'll skip that. The hosted payment pages allow your server to receive information as a transaction is processed within a hosted payment page. This includes a postback URL, which would be a URL on your server where as the form is filled by the user and they press submit, the transaction will be approved or declined, and you will get notification every single time they push approve or if they push the button and they get an approval or decline, your server will be notified. One of the things in that notification is a completed flag. The completed flag will tell you if it's the final approval or decline, and I'll cover that in a minute. So if it's the final one, obviously approval is final, but if you've specified only let them try up to 3 cards, then on the third card, third strike, you're out, then that completed flag will be set to true. If they cancel a session, you will get a notification through the postback URL as well if you've configured one. Check session calls are made from a remote POS or a server to our server to ask, like kids in the back seat, are we there yet? Are we there yet? So you can poll and ask, what's the status of this session right now, and you can go into a loop polling and pull the information about the same exact information you might get back with the postback URL, but you can actually ask for even more information, all the fields on the form, anything you want. Finally, if you've configured a redirect URL, at the end of the session we will redirect back to that page as you've configured it. So that's how you configure the flow control within your hosted payment page form. So let's jump into a hosted payment page form. Let's go back here for a second. Jump back. I'm going to log in to a test account. I'm going to click on Sessions, Manage Forms, and let's take a look at a hosted payment page form. I'm going to pick one that does have some information. So this flow control we've covered in other videos, how the graphics controls are specified here. In advanced settings, this is where you will find information on the card types you're going to accept and the card number and check acceptance options, form session control options, how many declines to allow, etc. And I'll cover that as we move a little forward. But the URLs for your postback are specified here if you want one, and the redirect is specified here if you want one, and we give you some hints as to how they're used and when they're used. So in the hosted payment page, let's start with the input control. You can specify the card entry options with type of cards, amounts and limits, expiration date entry options, and CVV2 options as well as the ACH options. So let's pop back over here, and we're going to scroll back up to the card entry options. You can specify your minimums and maximums, the card brands you accept. Now, do you only want to allow keyed entry? Do you want to allow keyed and swiped? Now, if you also allow swiped, we do support the Augusta, which is an EMV chip reader that works similar to a swipe that can read either swipe or chip with the same device. In addition, you can have the screen start on swiped but a button to switch to keyed, or the screen start on keyed with a button to switch to swipe. These are mainly for point of sale entry. You can allow only swiped, and you can put a pin pad card number entry on the screen. I'll cover that in a minute. And then you can have no credit card entry at all if it's only a check form. So if you've got card number manually entered, for instance, how do you want them to enter it? Do you want a table that shows a table style keypad for card number entry? In the table style keypad, it'll make a HTML table, or it'll just use buttons, and I will show you an example of that. So for a touchpad or a POS environment, you might want to, instead of having a typable field here, you click on the buttons with a mouse or with a touch screen, and it fills out the card number. So that is a keypad. And again, you can do it as HTML tables or buttons. If you've got some reason to use buttons, you can do that, or HTML tables. Now, for the card detection, You can make the user pull from a pull-down list of radio buttons of the types of cards, so whatever these are will appear as in a pull-down list or will appear as radio buttons, and they must type in a card that matches the type that they've selected. Alternatively, you can say don't make the user do that. Let the system, based on the card number they type, know whether it's a Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, etc. As a hint, you can actually say auto-detect it, but show the brand images for each type of card you accept, so it puts a little logo of each card brand up there so they know what type of cards you accept. For the expiration date, when you're keying it in, you can have a single HTML input field, which they type month, month, year, year. This is great for a point of sale or a call center where they know the format of the screen and they want to type rapidly. Alternatively, if it's consumer facing, then you'd like to have separate pull down menus for the month and the year so they can't enter invalid data. So if it's consumer facing, select this. If it's cashier or clerk facing, choose this. CVV2. How do you want the CVV2 entered? Don't ask for it at all. Show it, but don't make it mandatory. Show it and make it mandatory. Show it and make it mandatory for keyed transactions only. So if a point of sale system would probably choose this one, however, a user facing system for consumer facing might choose this option. Checks, there's a number of check options. You have to have a check processor set up on our side to be able to use some of this. So you enable it, and what do you want to use for the ACH or SEC code? And if there's a default configured on the gateway, you can specify to use that, or you can display a dynamic list of them, which you might do again if you're a call center. Otherwise, you can specify any of these types of transaction types for their SEC code. The bank account, do you want to display it? Personal business savings are defaulted to personal, defaulted to business, and they can pull from a pull down. The routing and accounting, how do you want that displayed? Checking account information, the repeat. Do you want to repeat it twice so they have to type in that account number twice or no? And check number, whether you need the check number or not, again, based on what your check processor needs. Check out the video on additional data fields. It covers some information about check processing and what may or may not be required, and that includes all of these things. If your check processor wants consumers to agree to the NACHA terms and conditions, you can display that checkbox, and the terms that appear there are done under the templates, and I've covered templates, form templates in another video, but the form templates are, you can edit the templates here to alter the text that's shown in there. So that covers your check ACH entry options as well. I've covered a lot of this here that you can specify the number of declines and the duplicate handling, but let's go over that a little bit more detail now. So if it's a point of sale that's facing a cashier or a mail order house, then you want to allow as many cards as that person on the phone thinks is wise, or you can restrict them if you want to. If it's consumer facing, you do want to specify how many declines so that you don't have consumers, anonymous people on the web typing in an unlimited number of cards. Now, at the end of that number of declines, it's like strikes in baseball. If you pick 3 strikes, at the end of 3 strikes, the session is terminated and they can't try anymore. So be careful about what you're specifying here because it does make a difference. Duplicate handling, if we get a duplicate transaction from the payment gateway, then this explains how to handle it. Do you want that duplicate declined on the screen, or do you want SlimCD to find the previously approved transaction and return and display that approved results? If you're using the client transref field that I talk about in the additional data fields that also appears in the SlimCD reports as the invoice number, then you probably want to decline the duplicate. If you're not using that and you may actually have duplicates, you have to decide. If somebody's actually purchasing things twice, you may or may not want them to get an approved screen because you might be telling them approved twice to do things they're not actually getting paid for. So you'll have to check that out, check out how client transref works, and decide if you want to allow duplicate checking. You can check out our allow duplicates field in our manuals in our zip files, which I've covered in other videos, but I'll talk about a little bit in the end of this slideshow as well. So there's a few flags that you can put onto your form fields, and check out the video on the form fields as well, that can influence how duplicate handling works. In a mail order environment, you may want an on-screen timer and they have to complete it, and you want it to show on the screen, count down at the end. What do you want it to do? Do you want to cancel the session or do nothing? So a great way to keep the phone operators moving fast is to put a 60-second timer. They've got to complete the page within 60 seconds. You can do things like that. The URLs for the postback and the redirect I also did cover, and what happens at the end. So here's the two URLs. I mentioned those before, but here they are, and it tells you how they are influenced by the final approval and decline screen. So the redirect, if you do not show a receipt on the screen, it's going to redirect directly to this URL. If instead you're showing a receipt, it will contain a small link that says continue, so after they see their receipt they can hit continue. You can also have it pop up a print option upon approval, so they can print their receipt, and in which case it'll have a print link and a continue link. So the options you specify here determine how the redirect URL acts. So you're going to want to play with those options and make sure that it best fits the transaction flow you like, and you can change the text that appears in those links and on the final improvement page here. And if your point of sale system that's popped up a browser, you may want to auto close that JavaScript at the end of the session. However, if it's a merchant, you may not want to auto close it. You want to show the links instead. So those are some options for you to decide how you want to display the final page and what kind of information you want to show the user, and how you want that page to act, automatically redirecting or making them click on a link because you're showing them a receipt, etc. You can also email a receipt, and here it specifies you can email it, yes, when the transaction's approved. You can also only carbon copy it to the merchant, or you can email that receipt to both the merchant and the consumer, your choice. Here's the from address that the email will come from, here's the subject line, and then here's the CC line, who you're carbon copying it to, and the email body is a template, as I covered under the hosted payment pages headers and templates and graphics design, so you can configure what goes into that email body. You can also configure the submit buttons, whether they're buttons or whether they're images, and if so, what's the text on them. If there's tooltips over them, this is a tooltip. You hover your mouse and it displays a little box, and style sheets, etc. for those. And there's an on click that we default to something that's built into our JavaScript that we produce on the page. However, if you need to intercept it first, you can do that. And do you want a cancel button on the page? So this says process transaction and cancel, so that's up to you if you want one or you want to hide it. So your option there for whether or not there's just a process transaction, or whether the merchant or the operator has the ability to hit cancel and cancel that as well. So the SlimCD Developers website has a lot of information in it, and I've talked a little bit about some of the information. If we go to the downloads page under the SlimCD SDKs, there's a Secure Sessions SDK that has a lot of information, including documentation on the screens we've just gone over, and transaction flow control for different use cases. I encourage you to download and take a look at that. In addition, if you want to know more about the duplicate handling and allow duplicates, etc., and how the invoice number or the client transref affects duplicate handling, download the Pause SDK, and there's a large manual in there that covers a lot of business use cases, as well as all the industry-specific data for hotel and auto rental. A lot of information in there, and all that's available here on the SlimCD downloads page. And I encourage you to take a look at that. And here's the links to our developers website, as well as the downloads that let you download the sample programs and the zip files, etc. So thank you for watching this presentation of the SlimCD Hosted Payment Pages Flow Control.